My name is Ralph Ben-Murgy, and I host a podcast called Not That Kind of Rabbi. Basically, what I'm doing is looking for the spirit in people, what animates them to do what they do, and the kinds of stories they can tell. You know, people believe they don't have a story. Oh, no, I don't really have much of a story. And then when you talk to them or ask them questions, you'll find out everybody has a story and that they're all wonderful. I think it's a really good idea for us not to become parochial, not to just think of ourselves, the Jewish people this, the Jewish people that. So many people of different faiths and different inclinations have so much to offer to us as Jews, but also to the world in general. So I tend to look for the spark in people more than I look for the affiliation in them. To support our work at the CJN, go to thecjn.ca/donate. And if you're Canadian, you'll even get a tax receipt.
With all the others, but no, it was not put, in front of anything. It was just one among many.
And it's been here since when, 1950?
55.
Wow. Finally, it gets a little love.
Yeah.
Variety.
Curators Louis Charbonneau and Monica Simon of the Aaron Museum inside Montreal's Temple Emanu-El-Beth Sholom synagogue took me on a private tour earlier this week of the permanent home where the actual peacock-shaped silver hanukkiah lives. The intricate silver-painted 19th century menorah is now the star of Canada Post's 2024 Holiday Edition stamps. The stamp depicts the artifact with all 8 candles lit and the shamash burning bright too. The peacock is on a stage emerging from behind heavy theater curtains, and the candle holders are attached below where the footlights would be. All the previous editions of these stamps have been graphic art, including one notorious issue that had to be recalled and reprinted after complaints that it showed a yellow star reminiscent of the ones the Nazis forced Jews to wear during the Holocaust. This year's stamp, though, has a real Holocaust survival story. When Canada Post asked the synagogue's Rabbi Gruschow to help them find an actual Jewish artifact for this year's stamp, she told them they'd come to the right place. Her museum houses a collection of 300 precious Jewish ceremonial objects. So the experts came to the shul, they chose a few finalists, and in the end, the peacock-hanukkiah won the day. It's no longer locked away behind glass for 70 years in the museum as it has been. It's now prominently displayed in a showcase in the main lobby and on 360,000 stamps. That's one for nearly every Jewish person in Canada. Sadly, the post office unveiled this year's official Hanukkah stamp on November 14th. And hours later, the unionized postal workers went on strike, so mail delivery's been on hold ever since. But as Jews prepare to mark the second Hanukkah after October 7th, with anti-Semitism in Canada exploding and around the world too, the team behind this year's official stamp hopes their unusually designed hanukkiah will serve as a message of light and resilience during these dark times.
Because it's a two-front battle, right? We know this. It's what's going on in Israel and it's what's going on in the diaspora. And so to hold on for hope on both fronts, I think is really vital.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Wednesday, December 11th, 2024. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, made possible in part thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. I always wanted to work for the CJN, even when it came as a newspaper in our house when I was growing up. It was a celebration. Everything stopped. We read the paper from cover to cover. Hi, I'm Ellen Besner, and I'm a journalist at the Canadian Jewish News, and I host the CJN Daily podcast. The CJN Daily is a way to showcase Canadian Jewish newsmakers around the world and hearing from the newsmakers themselves. I'm proud to do the work to continue to showcase the ways in which our friends, our neighbors, our rabbis are finding ways to find the beauty in their Jewish identity while upholding the civil rights that Canadian Jews have had since 1832. I'm proud to showcase how our community leaders are leading during these turbulent times, but we also hold them accountable too. We can only continue to tell these important stories with your help. Please visit thecjn.ca/donate to support our work, and you'll get a Canadian tax receipt to boot. Because Hanukkah comes so late this year, with the first candle on December 25th, there's always hope the strike could end in time, but that's not looking likely right now. The Prime Minister has said Parliament won't intervene and order the postal workers back on the job the way the government did in 2018 when a similar strike happened before Christmas. In the meantime, the hanukkiah's fans at Montreal's temple Emanu-El-Beth Sholom get to see the star of the stamp anytime, with a life-size blow-up of the poster of the stamp to boot, and some free first-day covers. You can check out the stamp through the link in our show notes. I sat down with Rabbi Lisa Gruschow and the museum co-curators Louis Charbonneau and Monica Simon for the full story. And the remote CJN studio inside the Rabbi study are Rabbi Lisa Gruschow and the two co-chairs of the museum. Welcome to the CJN Daily.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, tell me how this synagogue's museum treasure got to be featured.
Sure. So as you know, if you've been following the Hanukkah stamps, there's different artistic designs every year. They're beautiful, they're creative, some are more realistic, some are more abstract.
One had to get canceled because it had a yellow star, which was really bad taste.
I can imagine. And there was one year actually where the candle color choice felt too Christmassy to me. So I said something about that and we made a change. They're really very responsive. And the thought and time and effort they put into this at Canada Post is just, it blows me away. I had no idea before I got involved. But I think they had done an actual artifact for an Eid stamp maybe last year. And somebody at Canada Post said, we would love to have an artifact. We'd love to have an actual hanukkiah, but we don't know where we could find one. And I said, Temple happens to have this fabulous museum with these beautiful hanukkiot, and I connected them with Louis, and he took it from there. And it's just such a privilege and such a joy for us to have one of these treasures featured on a national level.
How did you pick this one? What spoke to you special about this?
Well, actually, I think the choice was between 4 hanukkiot. And when Canada Post came here to take the pictures, they spent a day here. It's amazing what they did. They were talking about different pictures taken, and they wanted to have the hanukkiah lit with flame. And since some of the 4, they were oil lamp, not candles, it was difficult. And this one is easier in some ways because...
That's not an oil lamp, right? It was always...
This is candle, yes, exactly. For the others, oil lamps, it was very difficult. They had to take many pictures and put that together eventually with Photoshop.
So you couldn't put the oil in. They would have had to AI it.
Yeah. No. And so I guess that finally that was the best one. But this one, it was amazing when they took the first picture of it. Everybody said, wow.
Just to demonstrate what Louis was talking about, once they had lit the candles of this hanukkiah, you can see the reflection of the flames actually on the peacock feathers. And it's absolutely exquisite how that, shows the glow that goes into the world way beyond what the flames can produce.
I guess we should talk about this. Our listeners won't be able to see it, but it's a beautiful silver hanukkiah, ornate with the shape of a peacock. I'm going to let you describe it first of all. Tell us what we're looking at and a bit of the background. Anyone can start.
Yeah, okay. So it's the hanukkiah there is a peacock on the background, but in front there is a stage actually, and the curtains are opened by 2 lions. And the candles are in the front, of course. And at the top, there is the shamash on the one side, and at the very top, the crown of the Imperial Austrian Empire. And it's a little bit unusual to have a peacock on an hanukkiah. Most of those peacock hanukkiahs, they were done in Vienna, but this one may have been done in Poland. We are not absolutely sure about it. So, why a peacock? That's the question.
Okay, why a peacock? I'll go. I'll play.
Why a peacock? Yes. Well, the hanukkiah was done the late 19th century or early 20th century. And at that time, the golden peacock goldene pave in Yiddish, was central to poetry and music in the Yiddish world. And that's why probably we have the peacock here. What does the peacock represent? Actually, it represents the people of Israel, the Jews, because the peacock, the golden peacock, goes over the world, different countries, and in those songs or poem, the peacock is always traveling around and looking a place to be, at ease, which was not the case at that time.
When I think of the peacock, or when I did before I knew all of that, there were two pieces I've been thinking of. One is this core Jewish concept of hidur mitzvah, right? You take something commanded and you make it beautiful. And that's what happens with all of those gorgeous objects in the museum, which are for holiday use, for Shabbat use, but they're so far beyond utilitarian, right? They're showing the love for the holidays and for the life cycle and for Shabbat in how beautiful and how creative they are. And I think that's something that everybody, whatever their Hanukkah looks like, enjoys on Hanukkah, choosing something that makes it beautiful and special. And then the other thing is, just thinking about it now, is this idea behind Hanukkah of Pirsumei Nisa, that you spread the miracle, you put your lights in the window. And of course, the peacock is not a shy bird, right? The peacock is not a bird that hides in the shadows, the male peacock especially. So there's something about it, I feel like this year especially, as a symbol of Jewish pride, of saying that we are going to, embrace and show who we are and be proud of who we are and think that we have something beautiful worth sharing. I think that's really meaningful this year.
We need to talk about that. Last year, city councils said we're not having menorah lightings. It was all after October 7th. People were afraid. And then there's a whole secular nativity issue, which they tried to put in Moncton's to not allow the menorah lighting because they said, well, we won't have anything except Christmas tree, right? So for Jews this year, lighting the menorah, lighting the hanukkiah, has more than the usual pre-October 7th political meaning, religious meaning. What do you personally feel that this menorah on a stamp should send a message for our community?
I think every holiday that's happened in the year after October 7th, where now it's more than a year, it just brings this deep sadness of how can we still be where we are? How can the hostages still not be home? How can this war be raging on? Last year, I knew it wouldn't come in time for Hanukkah, but I bought a hanukkiah from Yad L'Kashish, which shipped from Jerusalem, which is modeled after the kibbutz life. It's got trees, it's got fields, it's bucolic, it's gorgeous. And I remember getting it a year ago and thinking, when I light this next year, people will be back in the kibbutzim. There'll be peace. The families will be home. And here we aren't. And so it is that piece of the importance, I think, of holding on to hope and recognizing that we've had tough times before, we'll make it through, and that we don't want to hide. And I think the other thing that's really interesting about these Chanukiot, Hanukkah is a story. It's like a Rorschach test for Jewish history, how we understand Hanukkah, how we tell the story. Is it about armed revolution? Is it about fighting assimilation? Is it about spirituality, right? We tell the story so many ways and have for thousands of years since the story happened. And I look at these Chanukiot and I think, isn't it fascinating that they have these crowns for the empires or the countries they were in, that even when the position of Jews in the diaspora was far worse even than it is now, that there was an ability to say, we claim our diaspora identities too. We're going to incorporate those symbols. We're going to bring them into our Judaism. We're not going to be forced to choose. And I think that's part of it this year too. And I also, in terms of what you're saying, Ellen, about different municipalities kind of deciding not to do Hanukkah things, kudos to Canada Post. Kudos to holding on to that tradition of multiculturalism and being proud of the Canadian mosaic and featuring different religions as an educational tool, as a cultural tool to help little kids and grown-ups feel seen and valued. That's huge. I don't take that for granted at all.
And kudos to Canada Post for having put the word Hanukkah in Hebrew for the first time ever on a Canadian stamp.
And if you look on the web, you find the other Hanukkah stamp, and there are no Hebrew.
Right, back from 2017, I think, was the first one.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful because you can see that the artistic conception shows the word Hanukkah in French, in English, and then underneath in Hebrew, but it plays with the colors of each of these words, and they have the corresponding colors in the hanukkiah candles.
Right. So here the candles are white in IRL in real life, but in those did they change the colors, like photoshopped it or whatever?
Yeah, they did.
So they're blue
Absolutely.
and purple
Yeah.
and.
Yeah.
Are you okay? Are you fine with that?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, it's a joke in my family because I'm very particular about the order of the colors of the candle. If my wife wants to make me crazy in a loving way, I'll set them up and then I'll leave the room and she'll switch two around and see how long it takes me to notice, which is not very long. So I pity Canada Post a little. I did ask a couple of times about different color combinations and the order. Obviously, they were picking up on the peacock colors, but it was important to me that it look just right. And I think we got there.
You said Poland. What's the provenance? How did this museum get this actual?
Well, actually, it was given to the museum in the 50s by the Jewish Congress, and the Canadian Jewish Congress got many ritual Jewish ritual object, from an American organization, the Jewish Cultural Reconstruction, which was organized or put together after the Second World War. This organization actually got objects from different Nazi warehouses, and it was distributed over the world, mostly in Israel, well, 40% in Israel, and the rest all over the world. And in Canada, we got actually 151 objects. And here at the temple, we got 7 of them.
And so this one, they don't know anything more? Just that the
Well,
Nazis took
actually,
it?
in the documentation we have about it, they say that it probably come from a synagogue who was burning. It was taken out from the synagogue.
That would have been done during Kristallnacht.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Oh, we don't know.
We don't know.
But it was in Poland, so they'd have brought it. Maybe some Austrian Jews who brought it to Poland, right? Or the Nazis brought it.
You kind of think to yourself, if this hanukkiah could talk, what stories would it tell, right? From being in a family home, from being in a synagogue, from being looted by the Nazis and then restored to a Jewish home, to being on a Canada Post stamp. I mean, it's kind of extraordinary if you think about it. It would make a wonderful children's book, the story of this hanukkiah.
You mentioned about Canada Post, it was a whole day-long ordeal, and then the approvals. We have to talk about the fact that this was done before the strike, all this work.
They don't do, for the most part, a physical launch, but it appears in their materials, and they send out all of the promotional pieces about it and the story of the stamp. So we couldn't do anything before November 14th, but we knew that the next day, of course, was a Friday, and so that Shabbat, we had a representative of Canada Post. We had Louis and Monica sharing about the hanukkiah. We spoke about it and celebrated it at our services. And then on December 3rd, just recently, the museum did a phenomenal event talking about the history of many of the hanukkiot in the collection, with, of course, this one front and center. And so Canada Post has been super in terms of supporting our efforts to celebrate the stamp, in addition to doing their usual rollout of the stamp. Of course, the strike doesn't help anything, but as the person I was working with as Canada Post made clear, the communications people are not the people who are striking. They're working overtime communicating about the strike, but also still made time to keep working with us to bring this to fruition as beautifully as they have. The good thing is they're forever stamps, right? So if you really love these, you can stock up on them for next Hanukkah. And to keep them or to use them year-round. And Hanukkah, of course, being late, we can hope that maybe the strike will be resolved by then. So it's not ideal, but it's not a game changer. And of course, these stamps have a life that goes far beyond just putting them on an envelope and mailing something. It's nice to be able to do if you send Hanukkah cards and such.
Yeah, but no one does that. Basically, people collect them. They have first day covers. They save them. Right?
And kids still love them. You know, at the launch on the 3rd, there was a congregant's grandkid who came up to me and said he would love to have some of these stamps. And I gave him a book of the stamps and he was so excited and he brought them home and he asked for his parents to get him a frame to put them in. Like there's something, lasting about it. And the story that I love most was the one that one of our congregants, Melanie Boudreau, told at the service on the Friday night. She was talking about how she and her daughter moved to a neighborhood where really they were the only Jews and her daughter was the only Jew in the school. And when the teachers sent out the holiday cards, they made a point of putting a Hanukkah stamp on her daughter's card. And that meant so much to them. It helped them feel seen. And this was before October 7th, before all of it, just the experience of being a Jew in a non-Jewish world and feeling seen. And that one little sticky piece of paper can do that, I think is amazing.
Is there any final thing you want to tell our listeners, a message about what they should take from this year's stamp?
I think we just have to remember that we are tolerating and celebrating every single culture. And the fact that we can look at this beautiful hanukkiah and celebrate where it came from, what it stands for. And by the same token, Canada Post is also doing that for, I think they just issued a Diwali stamp. There are others that celebrate others' cultures, and that is just amazing that we can do that in Canada.
Amen to what Monica said. And I think, if Canada Post can put a hanukkiah on the stamp, we can put our hanukkiah in our windows. Even if they didn't put it on the stamp, we would put ours in our windows. But in a year where there's been a lot of heaviness, to take this as an opportunity to find the beauty and find the joy and embrace it and share it in every way you can.
The fact that it's a real hanukkiah with a history related to, the recent history of the Jewish people, it's very important. It's a lot more than just a graphic. It's the history's there. You feel that. It's very important. And I think Post Canada was very aware of that.
So many young people, they don't even know what a stamp is. They don't even send mail. It's all email, wedding invitations, everything, bar mitzvah. It's all done by, virtual. So,
well, what we should do is, for example, me as a grandparent, is to send letters with the stamp to our grandchildren.
My daughters will tell you that when they had their B'not Mitzvah, they did handwritten thank you cards and used the Hanukkah stamps. So we got a whole lot of them out there. And the other thing we're doing is at a recent event, one of our pajama havdalahs, we had our little kids make cards for Hanukkah that they wrote and that are going to be sent to some of our seniors who are over 90. And when Canada Post is back up and running, we're going to use those stamps and send them off. So there's a good intergenerational piece there too. We're not giving up on stamps.
Love it.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily. Our show is made possible in part thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Now, the candles are turquoise, purple, blue, and green on the stamp, just like the color of a peacock's feathers. Nevertheless, while the mail delivery is on hold, you can buy the 2024 Peacock Hanukkah stamps in person at a postal outlet where there is a larger Jewish population in the neighborhood. Our show is produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman. Our executive producer is Michael Freeman, and our music is by Dov Beck-Levine. Thanks for listening.
My name is Rivka Campbell, and I am the host of the CJN podcast, Rivkush. My podcast is a focus on Jews of color, talking about anything. It's really important for mainstream Jews to see that I am just as Jewish as you. The topics that interest you also interest me. I want to talk about Israel. You want to talk about Israel. I want to talk about food. Maybe it's not the food you want to talk about, but I want to talk about food. It's important that the person talking about Judaism, Israel, whatever, has a face like mine. It really, hopefully, changes the perception of Jews of color. To support my podcast and the rest of the CJN, please make a tax-deductible donation at thecjn.ca/donate.